Hey y'all, Lance from Permanent Records here. Welcome back to our YouTube channel. It's been a minute. Please forgive me. The last video I shot, I was not in any kind of shape to be shooting a video, much less posting it for public consumption. So I apologize to y'all who watched that one. Hopefully it was entertaining for you. Wow, I had so many brain farts. I was really scattered and very sleep deprived, which isn't terribly unusual. And that's probably the only reason I even do these videos, is because I'm just loopy enough to think it's a good idea. But anyway, I'm back this week with a new video, kind of a different take on what I usually do. And that is to show off some of the records we have on our wall, but also explain why they are up on the wall and why they're so expensive. As you can see behind me here, there are a bunch of empty gaps on the wall where I've taken down this stack of records that I have in front of me, and I'm going to talk about them one by one. Just so I can give a little perspective. A lot of people come into the shop and they're like, oh wow, I have that record, I didn't realize it was so valuable. My question to them always is it the exact same one, or is it just a similar one that you think is the same? So anyway, let's call this a hot take video on why records are so expensive. First and foremost, the bottom line for the price of any given record, just like anything, is really supply and demand. How many copies are in existence and how much do people want that particular item? Oftentimes there are so many that it doesn't even matter if a lot of people want them, because the supply is so high, the demand could never possibly catch up, right? Michael Frank's records, for example, as good as some of them are, there are so many in the world that the demand would have to be outrageous, and maybe it'll get there eventually. But at the moment, supply's up here, demand's down here, and that makes those records bargain bin records all day, most of them anyway. And the flip side of that is when you're talking about rare jazz or rare punk or rare metal, rare private pressings, etc. The supply is down here and demand is growing and growing and growing and growing, and that's when the price gets flip-flopped and becomes exponentially greater than what it used to be, when supply was the same, more or less, but demand was a lot lower. Things have changed, as you all know. If you're watching this channel, you know that things have changed in the last 15 or 20 years. Since I started my shop in 2006, record prices have pretty much skyrocketed. That's not to say that's true for every record. Some things have actually come down in value over the years. Your Ricky Nelsons, your Buddy Hollys, even I think Beatles and Stones records to a certain extent have come down a little bit over the years. But more often than not, things are going up, and that's because there are more people out there trying to get these records, and they haven't made more of them, not of the original pressings of them anyway, obviously, and more of them are getting beat up, thrown away, discarded one way or another, or hard filed in collections where they just won't come out for sale again for many years. So anyway, without further ado, let's get into a few wall records and why these records are a little pricey. So one reason for a record that looks like a common record at first glance, one reason this record is expensive, or the reason this particular record is expensive, is because it's a white label promo. So the original stock copies of this, even with the kind of die cut and vellum yellow jacket artwork and the inner sleeve, etc., originals of this are like 30-40 bucks generally, maybe less than that if they're in off condition, or definitely less than that if they're in off condition. But there are only a fraction of the number of stock copies on white label promo copies. The white label promo is representing only a handful of the amount of copies sold. And I think most of you probably already know this, but white label promos were literally that. The center labels are black and white. Usually, if they're a white label promo, they definitely are. And they were issued as promotional items for, you know, to be handed out to publicists and writers, you know, journalists for music magazines and so forth, and for radio stations a lot of times as well. So there are some of them out there in the world, and some records actually sold so few copies that the white label promo is more common than the stock copy, believe it or not. But LA Woman, a classic album by The Doors, this came out in 1971 originally. Stone cold classic. Finding a white label promo of this kind of record is pretty hard. So that's one reason why some records like this are more valuable than you might think they are. I have another example of a white label promo here. I don't know if I've ever shown this record on the channel. This Jack Wilkins record, Windows, is absolutely stunning. If you like jazz guitar, you have to check this one out. It's also got a really funky break on one of the tracks. What was that track called? Oh yeah, he does a cover of Red Clay on here that's stunning and super, super groovy. But this is a white label promo. This is kind of a rare and valuable record to begin with. The stock copies are not cheap, but this is a white label promo, which is part of the reason why it's even more valuable. All right, another variant you can get into is a test pressing, right? So this Ron Wood record, if you've never heard this already, I highly recommend it. It's really, really fantastic. Super, super feel-good jams going on here. Just a killer classic rock record. This record is like 15, 20 bucks on a good day. Well worth it. Still underpriced in my opinion because you don't see it that often. It's not as common as a lot of the Rolling Stones albums are. And I think it's pretty underappreciated still. Well, that said, this test pressing is very rare. This is the only test pressing we've ever had of this particular album, and I don't know how many copies of the test pressing exists. Probably somewhere between, on the low end, 10, and on the high end, 100 copies, I would guess. I'd be surprised if there's 100 copies of the test pressing in existence, and or however many survive this many decades. So it's really, really hard to come by test pressings of classic rock albums like this. And that's because obviously there are very few of them. They only made enough test pressings to give to the artists, the management, and the labels for the most part in order to approve the quality of the cut. They want to make sure that everybody's happy with the way the record sounds before they go and mass produce tens of thousands or millions of copies. So test pressings are very, very rare compared to stock copies as well, even more rare than the white label promo. And yeah, that's another reason why any given album that may not look like a big deal can be more collectible. Also, finding still sealed copies of vintage records like this. Oh, I'm so terrible at pronouncing Brazilian artists' names. Let's just say Gilberto Amoroso. Also, don't speak Spanish well or Portuguese. Anyway, this record's also already fairly collectible and expensive, but this Bossa Nova classic is still sealed, and it's very hard to find records like this that are in high demand, that sold well back in the day, or at least sold decently well, still sealed. Most people buy these records, or bought these records brand new, and immediately crack them open to listen to the album, right? Yeah, of course, like who wouldn't do that? Well, some people forgot to open their copy. You know, sometimes stock copies ended up just kind of sitting in a warehouse for decades, and you know, from record stores or distributors, what have you. Publicists, industry people oftentimes have sealed records that they were given that they just never cared to open. Well, anyway, that's one other reason why certain titles can be very expensive. Not every sealed record is valuable. There are plenty of worthless sealed albums, but if you find a desirable title and it's still sealed and it's the original pressing, you're looking at a premium on top of whatever that record generally goes for. Sometimes as much as 10 times as the amount an open copy would go for, even if it's mint. But that said, sometimes it's only 10%, 25% more. But there's usually a little premium tacked on for a still sealed copy of a record like that, or this stone cold classic Village Green Preservation Society by the Kinks. Who bought this record and didn't open it? This isn't a cutout like the Gilberto record is. This is a straight up, you know, store stock copy, still sealed from back in the day. Absolutely amazing. I won't get into the buyer beware part of sealed records in this video because that'll take far longer than I have, but there are also drawbacks to buying sealed records. It can be a little risky. Another reason why records like this Jesse Ed Davis, can be more valuable than you think is because they come with bonus stuff. In this case, this comes with the first family of new rock poster that the label did for this particular release, and more often than not, records that came with posters or inserts, in printed inner sleeves, etc., don't have them. And the poster is especially hard to find for this particular record and others as well. There's lots of records that were issued with posters and cool inserts originally, and that are hard to find with those extra bonus items. So yeah, not a crazy expensive record without the poster, but the poster really adds a lot of value to that particular title as well. And this one, and I won't get these out, this is super cool. I think I've probably shown them in a previous video. If I haven't, comment below and I'll bust them out for a future video. But this copy, this original US pressing of Piper at the Gates of Dawn by Pink Floyd, of course, or the Pink Floyd, with Syd Barrett at the helm, comes with 9, I think it is. Yeah, 9 pieces of sheet music, one for each track on this album. Absolutely amazing. I have no idea who this sheet music was created for, but it looks to be vintage from the era that this album was released. I think this is a 67 LP. Super, super cool. And again, that's the first time we've ever had this with this sheet music. We've had this record many times in the past, hardly ever still in the original shrink wrap, and virtually never with this cool sheet music. So yet another reason why a premium may be tacked on to what in that case is already kind of an expensive album. Certain labels just have a cachet and a high demand and a reputation. Blue Note Records in the jazz world, as I'm sure most of you know, is the creme de la creme. One of the best labels in the genre, just absolutely legendary records were released on Blue Note back in the day and are still being released on Blue Note. And not only is this copy of Stick Up by Bobby Hutcherson, extremely clean. It's, most people will call it mint. I think this is probably more near mint. It's also a promo copy, an audition, as they call it in this case, mono LP in this stereo jacket. Blue Note's history as far as like mixing and matching jackets and center labels and stuff is a very long, convoluted story that again I don't have time to get into now, but yeah, this is a rare and expensive record as it is, even more desirable with that mono LP inside the jacket with that cool audition sticker on there as well. And then of course you have imports, something new by the Beatles. The US pressing of this, even if it's OG, it's hard to sell for more than $10 these days. It's just very, very common. Again, there's demand for Beatles records, but the supply is also astronomical. They sold millions of records, as I'm sure you already know. But this is the UK original pressing with the flip back. I don't know if you can see that in the video, but it's got the standard UK jacket design there, and that's what that's called, flip back. So the original pressing from the country of origin where the band is from can sometimes make a massive difference, especially in the case of Beatles records. UK pressings are generally just more desirable for most titles. And the reason for that, well, at least the reason for the value being high, is that the population in the UK is just a fraction of what the population in the US is. And the Beatles sold a ton of records in the UK and in Europe as well, but they sold even more records in the US. And so there are fewer UK and European pressings to go around than there are the US pressings, which are fairly common. So again, not an expensive record generally, but a nice clean original UK pressing is pretty desirable. And then you also have other variants, or variables I should say, like audiophile pressings like this MoFi In the Court of a Crimson King by King Crimson. The original pressing of this album is like 20-30 bucks generally, even a very, very clean OG US pressing. The UK pressing is a little more expensive, also country of origin. Anyway, this is a made for audiophiles reissue from a company that at the time had a very solid reputation. There's arguments online about whether their reputation means anything at this point, but these records, most of them, have still held some of their value. They may not be as valuable as they once were, but yeah, MoFi, I think, has always done a pretty decent job at what they do. I'm not an audiophile, so I'm not going to comment on that. If you want to comment on that subject in the comments below, feel free. I'm not going to go there. So yeah, stuff like that. And then you also have records like this that came out in more recent times, before the vinyl resurgence. So in whatever 2004 or 6, whenever this record came out, I think it was more like 02 or 04. They just weren't pressing a lot of copies of this on vinyl. People were buying this on CD, or they're just stealing it from Napster and burning CDs on their own, or just putting it on their iPods at the time. So there are very few copies of records like this Electric 6 LP, and 90s stuff like Mazzy Star Records, shoegaze, alternative rock. I don't need to tell you, everybody's hot to trot for all things 90s these days, and that includes original vinyl records from the 1990s, which also doesn't apply to every record released in that decade, but the reason for the skyrocketing value is the demand is going up and the supply is relatively low for the majority of these titles. So I could go on. I have a whole bunch of records still in front of me, but I'm out of time today. If you'd like to see another video like this, please shoot me a comment. I love keeping the conversation going in the comments below. If you have any thoughts on why records are so expensive these days, or relatively expensive compared to what they used to be, feel free, drop me a line. I'd love to hear your thoughts, and I'd love to know more about what you like about this video and or any of the other videos that I've posted in the past. Also, if you don't subscribe already, maybe you should think about doing that. Just saying. Anyway, until then, peace.